whenever there is like a situation where there's an epidemic of a huge amount of people suffering with something, it's very easy and convenient to go, oh, they're just not doing what they should be doing. But is it as simple as that? Or is there actually more going on? Is it that we're actually not looking at it in the right way?
Hi, and welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Krissy Hawks, and I am here with Elwin Robinson. And today we are discussing weight loss, or how to have optimal weight. Weight loss is a very, very big topic, Elwin. So I want to ask you, why did you choose this topic for us today?
Yeah, it's a good question, Krissy, especially considering that, you know, in my 10 plus years of giving out health advice on occasion, I've always steered clear of it. And the reason being that I have never been overweight. And so I always felt like because I haven't been through that myself, that I don't have the right to help other people with that. So if that's a deal breaker for you watching this, then I'm telling you right from the get-go, you don't have to watch, right? But the reason why I'm doing it anyway is, first of all, obviously because it is super important. And that's one of the things that did come out in the last couple of years of lockdowns. I won't say anything about it to make sure I don't get myself struck off anything. But one of the things that came up was how important not being overweight is to health, as if we didn't already know that. So I won't do the usual thing like I did with, say, digestion, of explaining why it's so important, because I feel like everyone already knows that being overweight is a major predictor for so many different illnesses, almost every major disease. So I won't go into details and depress people any more than they probably already feel.
Are you sure? Come on. We can go down that road. Maybe not.
Yeah. So, and it's also ironic that I would be doing this today because literally today I weigh more than I ever have in my whole life. Currently I'm 81 kilos, which is, I don't know, 175 pounds, something like that. And I'm 6'3", so it's not excessive, but still. And that brings up one point. So I will say one reframe that I've had, especially in the last couple of years, is for anyone who feels like people who are overweight are lazy, or if they are overweight, that they are lazy. I would say that's not one of the factors. We're going to talk about the different factors, right? But I would say, if anything, and this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but a lot of the time, they're just people with great digestion. Right? Like the first episode we did, was on the subject of digestion. And again, a lot of people with bad digestion are not necessarily underweight. But when you have really bad digestion, like I did, you do get underweight because your body literally isn't able to absorb not only the nutrients, but even the calories. So yes, of course, there are overweight people who still have digestive issues. But if they're really severe, if you have a stomach ulcer or if you have diverticulitis, all these things. So a lot of the time, if you look at these skinny people and you're feeling jealous of them, they may just have severe digestive issues. It may well not be that, or if they're very careful what they eat or how much they eat and all the rest of it, again, it may not be because they're so much more disciplined. It may just be because they know if they don't, if they accidentally eat gluten or if they accidentally eat a huge meal, that they're going to, be in pain later in digestion. And so they just decide it's not worth it. So that's a little bit of a reframe. I hope that's helpful. But yeah, the main reason that I wanted to focus on it is because, other than it being important, it's because I have actually had quite a lot of success over the years, and especially the last couple of years, in helping people with this issue, including people very close to me. And I can see the struggle that they go through. And, all flippancy aside, it is very important. It is very powerful. Obviously, being excessively heavy not only can lead to all kinds of potential medical issues, but socially, psychologically, a lot of people feel a lot of feelings around guilt that I've just hopefully tried to debunk in a humorous way, or, shame is a big one. And I don't believe in shaming people for their behavior because it doesn't work. A lot of the, it's a bit dependent. Maybe sometimes it works, anecdotally it works, but statistically it doesn't. People who feel shame just engage in more of the behavior that they're being shamed for, whether it's smoking or overeating or whatever it might be. But the main reason I want to address it is really because of what I've learned, especially in the last couple of years, that has really debunked for me in my mind what actually causes weight gain. So I'm going to come from it. Some of it you may be familiar with, but hopefully some of it you won't be familiar with. It's a fundamentally new way of looking at things, because whenever there is like a situation where there's an epidemic of a huge amount of people suffering with something, it's very easy and convenient to go, oh, they're just not doing what they should be doing. But is it as simple as that? Or is there actually more going on? Is it that we're actually not looking at it in the right way? So I'm hoping to share, like debunk some of the myths and share a way of looking at it that will be genuinely helpful, as I said, because it has been with some of the people I work with.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, that brings me into, there's a lot of misunderstandings around weight loss. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what those are?
Absolutely. So I kind of already touched on one, which is this idea that weight loss should be easy. So of course, it's not necessarily. There are some people who have a genetic predisposition for putting on weight. I will talk about the various factors that lead to that during this video. I won't go into it right now. But this idea that all you've got to do is move more and eat less. You're right? If only it were that simple. So the next one is that it's only a matter of calories in versus calories burned. Now, this is not quite incorrect, but what I find is that the focus of it is incorrect. Meaning, so when people talk about this, they're like, just eat less calories, just exercise more or move more, right? And while both of those things are good advice in most cases, not even all cases, and I'll go through why sometimes eating less calories is a bad idea if you want to lose weight, and I'll go through why sometimes moving more is a bad idea if you want to lose weight. But a lot of the time, that is actually good advice. But this distinction about taking calories in versus calories burned, what is it that causes you to burn calories as fuel, right? That's the crucial distinction. That's what I want to really get into with this. A couple more myths. The dieting or diet is the key. This is really common as well, right? If it's that basically, systematically starving yourself, I guess it's an outcropping of the previous myth. But the interesting thing is that dieting, especially, extreme dieting, slows down your metabolism. What is metabolism? Metabolism is the rate that your body creates energy, or to put it another way, the rate that your body burns fuel from calories. So by eating less calories, you actually slow down how fast your body burns calories in many situations. Again, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But so this is why we have to really understand the situation. What's actually causing the weight gain, or probably more importantly, the inability to lose weight in the first place, before we just start trying to restrict calories or, exercising way more than we did before. And it's why that doesn't work. What I would say is, what I want to share in this video is why that doesn't work. Proven 97% of the time. And then the other thing that's really common that I see a lot is this idea that there's one right diet for everyone, right? So that the key is to just eat a ketogenic diet, or it's to just eat a fruitarian diet, or it's just to eat a gluten-free diet, or whatever, right? Now, there are certain dietary principles that I'll talk about. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, that tend to be helpful in almost all cases, but still, the idea that you just follow this diet, right? I won't name anyone as I'm saying that they're all unhelpful, but all of the, something diet, all those things. If they've worked for you, and worked does not mean helped you lose weight, but worked means helped you lose weight and keep weight off, then fantastic. But you probably wouldn't be watching this video if that were the case. And as I said, then you'd be among the 3%, right, statistically. So those are the big myths that I see all the time.
Those are really good. I mean, what was true for us, and I know at least for me too as well, what was true for me in my 20s or my early 30s is not necessarily the same for me now. And when I say true, what worked, what helped me back then, is the body shifting and changing. And that can be confusing. And as well, like you say, oh, try this diet, do that, try this diet and see what works. But it doesn't always compute. And then you get frustrated and people just kind of lose their motivation or their will, or they just stop. So what are these truths that, about weight loss that many people don't know about?
Yeah, well, I'll skip ahead to one of them that you just touched on. And it's that, of course, it's dependent on context. right? So you just mentioned several variables there. Your age, right? What works for you at 20 might not work at 40 or 60. Your gender, right? What works for men might not work for women, and vice versa. And then, all the other genetic factors, right? But your lifestyle, your environment, if you're in a super cold environment versus a super hot environment, like there are all these things that are not considered in these one size fits all diet plans or exercise plans. So one of the big myths is that I also want to address is this idea that weight loss is more important than fat loss, right? So this thing about getting on a bog standard scale and basing all your success on what it says is unhelpful.
On that one number, that's it.
Absolutely.
You're right.
Because the risk factor that's been identified for all the stuff we talked about before is fat, not weight, right? And so some of the things that we'll talk about probably near the end, like the quick fixes, as it were, like growth hormone and oxytocin, these tend to be compounds that help to reduce fat, but increase muscle and bone mass. So muscle and bone mass is good, especially as you get older. And yes, absolutely for women, not just men. It's one of the biggest issues for elderly women is that they're more likely to much more likely to have an injury, and a lot of that is just simply due to like a lack of muscle strength. So this is a big deal, maintaining that muscular strength. This idea that weight matters. So what matters is percentage of fat, which to get it exactly right is really, really difficult. But you can get some idea by getting those scales that cost about $20 that you step on barefoot and you hold a paddle thing. You might have used it at a gym or a doctor's office, but you can just get a home one. That they're not 100% accurate, but they will tell you roughly what kind of percentage you are. So that's much more helpful. And then also waist is another great one, because that gives an indication of visceral fat. And visceral fat is like the fat, especially that's between all those organs, especially digestive organs in the abdominal cavity. And that is a more significant predictor for health issues than fat itself or weight. In relation to insulin resistance and blood sugar issues specifically. So you may, in fact, even have a weight on the scale that's like the high end of like healthy from a BMI perspective, but you may still have a significant issue if you have like a really big waist. And of course, on the other end, if you're a highly muscular person, you could get on the scale and it will tell you that you're obese for your weight, if you're high. And in fact, you're not at all, right? Because you've got low level body fat. So I know that, women generally are not aiming to put on a lot of muscle, but still, do not be afraid of weight. It's only ever fat, excess fat. And of course, the level of what is excessive is significantly different for men and women as well when it comes to body fat. Women just need to have more body fat to be healthy. So again, we got to understand all these different things. Okay, so here's probably the key point. It's almost impossible to lose weight if your metabolism is slow. Okay, so again, what is metabolism? Metabolism is the rate at which your body burns calories, using oxygen as well. In fact, oxygen is more significant than the calories, but uses oxygen and calories, usually in the form of glucose, but it could be other things, for your mitochondria, which are the little energy factories inside of every cell. Some of them only have a few, some of them have thousands per cell, but these little energy factories will, using something called the Krebs cycle, which I won't get into the complicated biology, but basically the miraculous process by which your body turns the physical into the non-physical, whereby it turns matter in the form of like oxygen or glucose into energy. And it does that, this is usually called ATP. And so to get out of the science and getting into something more relatable for a second. So as you said, Krissy, and again, this depends on genetics, like some people, no matter what age they are, will not have this. But for a lot of people, when they're, say, in their 20s, if they eat more food, they'll just get warmer. And that is a sign that of a super fast burning metabolism. Just creating, like, because there's an extra, beyond a certain level of ATP production, your mitochondria actually switch. Like, they don't want to create excessive ATP, and so they switch their energy production, and they'll just produce heat as a byproduct. Now, if you cannot relate to that at all, if you're cold all the time, you're more likely to be overweight. See, so there's like a little connection there already. A great practical example of this that I'll tell you is that, and any medical doctor will agree with me on this, if you are hyperthyroid, meaning if your thyroid is significantly overactive, it is impossible to be overweight. Or if you were already overweight when you became hyperthyroid, it is impossible to maintain that. You will just keep losing weight, basically, if you're significantly hyperthyroid. So if that's the case, that having a hyperthyroid will mean that it's impossible to be overweight or hold on to being overweight, if it's in fact like impossible to not lose weight, why is that? It's because when your thyroid is hyper or overactive, what does the thyroid actually do? One of the principal things that the thyroid does is control the rate that that process I just talked about happens. So it's like the equivalent of an accelerator and a brake. So when the thyroid produces more thyroid hormone, and that thyroid hormone actually manages to get into the cell, and there's a bunch of things that can stop that happening. So that's the complication of the thyroid that we might do here. We'll probably do in a separate episode. But assuming that an excessive amount of thyroid hormone is getting into the cell, that is giving too much of the accelerate signal, so that the mitochondria are then burning too much calories, burning too much energy, and then you end up excessively hot, and you end up anxious, and you end up not being able to hold on to any weight, which are some of the classic symptoms of being hyperthyroid. Of course, there are more serious symptoms. It's a life-threatening disease, up beyond a certain level, and so this is why doctors take it very seriously. They take hyperthyroid a lot more seriously than hypothyroid. So anyway, you might say, how is this relevant to me, Owen? I'm not hyperthyroid. Okay, but my point is, if you were, then you could ignore all the rules of dieting. You could eat McDonald's, you could eat 5,000 calories a day, you could never get off the couch, and you would probably still be losing weight, right? So that tells us there's more to it than just, calories in. And remember I said earlier that it's technically true that it's calories in versus calories burned, but calories burned is not only how much you get off a chair and move, right? In fact, it's not principally that. It's more than anything, it's the rate of metabolism. And so, of course, we talked about hyperthyroid. So, some people hearing this will be like, how do I become hyperthyroid? Don't. It's not a good idea.
It's not recommended. There's a lot of other stuff that comes with it. But
yes.
I know you're going to take this in a minute down the direction. I don't want to distract you or detract you. And how can somebody find out their rate of metabolism? You may cover this later, but that's a question I want to just bring here now.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Unfortunately, there is not like a metabolism test, but it is a great question. So you can see what your tendency would be with a genetic test. As I said, there's a genetic component there, and there is a test for that. With Genetic Insights, that's part of our weight loss bundle package thing of different reports. There's, one of the key reports is absolutely on metabolism. And so if your metabolism has a genetic tendency to be slow, that is one, that is a significant factor then. And that's something that you're then going to need to overcome. There are other factors that will influence metabolism other than thyroid, but thyroid is the number one. It is the most important. So that's why it's the example that I use. So speaking of which, so you may not be hyperthyroid listening to this, but you may be hypothyroid. So what does hypo mean? It's the opposite. It's rather than too much of the accelerate, it's like too much of the brake. Or to put it a different way, and more accurate way, basically, if not enough thyroid hormone is getting into your cell. And again, this is complicated because sometimes what looks like there's a perfect amount in your blood, but it's not getting into the cells for various reasons. Usually iron deficiency or cortisol imbalance could be the reason why not enough is getting into the cells, but there can be other reasons as well. So if there's not enough thyroid hormone, which is free T3 getting into the cell, then your metabolism will always be low. Again, no matter what you do. And so to go back to the point I made earlier, one of the reasons why restricting calories is so unhelpful and such a bad idea in a lot of cases. Now, listen, if you're overweight because you're eating 8,000 calories a day, because your digestion is just that good, then first of all, congratulations for having such a strong digestion. And then second of all, yeah, unless you really do, exercise to the level that you need that many calories, that's probably a factor, right? So I'm not saying it's never a factor, but what I am saying is if you're on a, roughly, even if you're on, I don't know, 3,500 calories and you really should be on 2,500, what often will happen in that case is someone will go, right, that's it, I'm dieting now, and they'll go down to like 1,500, something like that, right? For at least a while, where it's a day, a week, a month, whatever. So doing that basically tells your system, oh my God, you've got a starvation situation going on here, and it will send a signal from the pituitary, which we learned about in the last episode, TSH, to your thyroid, telling it produce less thyroid hormone, right? And that less thyroid hormone will then mean that there's less getting in the cell, and then your body is burning less energy. This is a completely sensible thing for your body to do, by the way, because it's just thinking, okay, so less calories available, then we've got to downregulate energy production. Now, of course, there's all kinds of problems to downregulating energy production other than potential likelihood of being overweight. The only time that you don't become overweight if your thyroid is low is if you also have digestive issues. And that was the delightful situation that I was in. But generally, that's one of the classic symptoms of being hypothyroid, is that you gain weight and you just can't lose it. In the same way that one of the classic symptoms of being hyperthyroid is that you lose weight and can't gain it. So there are other issues, right? If your body does not have enough ATP, if it doesn't have enough energy produced by your mitochondria, then actually every system of your body suffers. And this is one of the reasons why a person can get digestive issues if they lack thyroid hormone, or if they lack enough energy, because there's not enough energy for the digestion to work properly. They can also have mental health issues, stress, anxiety, depression, all the rest of it, like we covered a couple of episodes ago, because the nervous system doesn't have enough energy. And there's not enough energy for the immune system to function properly. There's not enough energy for the respiratory system to function properly. There's not enough energy for every system to function properly. And so where you tend to get problems once your mitochondria are not producing enough energy is largely, I would say, from my experience, predicted by lifestyle, but also significantly genetics, So if it shows up for you in your digestive system first, maybe it's because you took loads of antibiotics when you were young or ate a terrible diet, which would be lifestyle. Or maybe it's because, you just have a weaker digestive system, which would be genetics, right? So my point is, when your cells aren't making enough energy, the problem will show up somewhere, right? But again, looking at the society that we have, right, that 60% or something of people are overweight, it's probably the biggest area that showed up. And that's why I want to make this video today. And also, when I tell people what I do, when they ask, a lot of them are like, oh, have you got anything to help lose weight? That's like the most common question I get. And, the funny thing is, a lot of the time I'll be like, you know what? Probably if I just gave you some thyroid hormone, you probably lose weight. But I'm definitely not going to do that, because that has to be monitored, but with a doctor and regular blood tests, all the rest of it. The other way that you can lose weight, by the way, just the cheating way, of course, is taking stimulants, right? You take methamphetamine every day, you'll lose weight. You take crack cocaine every day, you'll lose weight. And yes, even if you consume a lot of caffeine every day, although it's not as strong as those other two, it will help lose weight. So all the people who claim that caffeine helps you lose weight, it is true to some degree. Why is it true? For exactly the same reason, right? All these things are temporarily, at least, speeding up metabolism. All stimulants also speed up that process of your body making energy. Now, they're doing it for a different reason, right? In that case, your body is speeding up the process of making energy because it thinks there's an emergency, right? Action stations, life in danger, let's produce as much energy as possible in an attempt to survive, right? So that's what stimulants help to facilitate or facsimile maybe, right? They make you feel as if there's an emergency even when there's not. That's one of the things that stimulants do. But it is why they work. But again, in the same way that dieting is not sustainable because eventually your body realizes and downregulates, it's the case with stimulants, right? If caffeine helped you lose weight long term, then why is it that we have an obesity epidemic and a stimulant abuse epidemic, right? So the research that shows, we took these athletes and everything that they were doing is the same, but one of them we gave them 500 milligram caffeine a day, and the other one we gave them no caffeine, and the ones who took 500 milligram caffeine lost weight. Well, yeah, of course, right? Because you're jacking up their metabolism and their energy production temporarily with that, but it's not a long-term strategy again. So exercise, I haven't really talked about it much. Is exercise a good idea? Yes. So exercise does also speed up metabolism, right? The thing that we've just been talking about. In the same way that your body will produce more energy if there's an emergency, in the same way that your body will produce more energy and even produce heat if you're eating too many calories, if you can handle it, if your metabolism is really fast. Absolutely, if you move more, your body goes, oh, this person needs more energy, speed up metabolism, right? But only to a certain point. And this is the thing again, when people go from sedentary lifestyle where their only exercise is like walking between the chair and the car and then, the chair in the car to a chair in the office and all the rest. If that's your lifestyle and you go from that to like going down the gym and like, running for half an hour and lifting heavy weights and all the rest, it's such a shock to the system that a lot of the time it doesn't just increase because it goes into panic mode. It goes, what the hell is this? So that panic mode, as we talked about in the stress episode, temporarily really good for you, but you keep doing that to your body and it will start to downregulate and put you into that dorsal vagal mode. I won't explain that again. You got to watch the stress and anxiety episode. But
no, yeah. I mean, what I am hearing is this theme is that these things that you're mentioning in this space, they're just not sustainable. And there's also it was sounding like, a long-term impact that's not going to be to your benefit.
Most definitely, yeah. Now, I'm not saying exercise won't be to your benefit long term, but I am saying like the extreme shift from no exercise or hardly any exercise to pushing yourself really hard. Generally, what I find is when people do that, and they do a lot, right? Like they famously do it in January every year. I think gym memberships, and gym attendance, I remember I used to regularly go to the gym and, the attendance just went sky high every January for a few weeks. And what happens with that is that, the body goes into this stress mode. But generally, I find that either the person gets ill and then they're ill for a week or two. And then once they feel better, I'm not going to this February now, forget it, Or they get injured. That's really common as well. Or they are so exhausted that they just can't do it anymore. Those are the three most common things that I see. So the exhaustion thing will relate to, you should only run on stress for a certain period of time, then it's natural to feel exhausted. A sensible, wise person will say, okay, I need to rest more. So there's nothing wrong with that. If you're pushing yourself way harder than usual, that you would then, feel fatigue. That's your body trying to recover. In terms of getting ill, the reason that's so common is because, as we talked about again in the stress episode, high stress chemicals temporarily improve the immune system, but high stress chemicals for too long, they actually tank it. And there's loads of studies about this around exercise, that some forms of exercise will stress the immune system more than others. But the basic bottom line of it is what they always find is like this curve, like no exercise, not great immunity. Medium exercise, great immunity. Too much exercise, low immunity again. So it's like a bell curve. And that right amount, if you're not used to exercising at all, maybe walking 20 minutes a day, right? That right amount, if you are used to exercising intently, may well be, an hour or maybe even more a day of, really intense exercise. It really depends on your situation. But that right level for you is the key thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you're making in there too. And then I would also, query, the type of exercise, because I know what you mentioned earlier was having that, the bone density and the muscle mass. I mean, A while ago, a gentleman was out walking and he fell in front of my house. I went out to go help him and he could not get himself up off the ground. So, and it's, I think as well that being able to maintain some of that muscle mass and have that strength there, not it always being cardio or things like that. What are your thoughts to that?
Yeah, definitely. So this is a bit of a tricky one for a few different reasons. I know, again, some people are very clear, just like they are with, diet, that you should be vegan or carnivore or whatever, like they have their extreme views. There are people who say that definitely aerobic exercise is the way to go. Definitely resistance training is the way to go. Or, the kind of intermediate, definitely like high intensity interval training is the way to go. Again, I feel like it's really context dependent. There are certain contexts. What I will say is generally those focused on longevity are more focused on muscle mass, whereas those who are more focused on brain performance are actually more focused on aerobic. So there's a lot of evidence that if having your brain in tip-top condition is important to you, then that aerobic exercise really is the most helpful thing that you can do. And, conversely, there's a lot of evidence, as you just said, maybe for the reasons of increasing muscle mass and bone density and all the rest, even into an older age. And I think because of also the release of growth hormone that happens when you do resistance training and various other factors, that resistance training is often associated with longevity. I kind of like high intensity interval training, actually. I do like that middle ground personally, because it has a bit of both. It has that intensity, but then also the aerobic and the variation between. And there's a lot of, but again, I don't want to hang my hat on that. I don't want to alienate anyone based on that. I'm open to being educated as to why that's not the case. And why your thing is better. But I will say that, I would try and resolve all the other stuff we talked about first before you do really intense aerobic or resistance training. Now, I say really intense, right? Obviously, you want to lift a few weights, that's no big deal to you. You want to go for a run, that's no big deal to you, that's fine. But I'm talking about like really, really pushing yourself very hard while you are still significantly overweight and probably have a slow metabolism, all the rest of it. There's a reason why it often doesn't work out, and that's what I want to go through. And then the last factor that I think is really important is that there's often really powerful psychological issues that prevent a person losing weight. And they're often related to trauma, they're related to addiction, feelings of emptiness, disassociation from the body. A lot of the time, it's sexual abuse. A lot of the time, it's neglect. Like there's all kinds of reasons why psychologically, unconsciously, a person stays overweight. So I don't want to dismiss that as well. It's not so much my area, but you could say, well, why does it matter, Owen? If you're right about this metabolism thing, they just followed all your advice, wouldn't it work anyway? And the answer is actually technically yes. But the issue is not that it doesn't work if psychological issues are the thing that are causing you to be overweight. The issue is you won't do what I'm going to recommend consistently enough for it to work if there are psychological issues that are keeping you overweight. And so a lot of the psychological issues are about, if it's that you have a feeling of emptiness inside you, then there's a real tendency towards addictive behavior of all kinds. And so that, if your addiction is, I don't know, stimulants, right? If it's primarily, amphetamines and caffeine and all the rest of it, that's less likely to lead to weight gain. But obviously, if the emptiness inside of you, if you fill it up by the most common and, arguably effective way, which is just to overeat, then this is like a really important point. I had a trauma expert called Gabor Mate talk about in an interview the other day. And he, I guess he's a trauma person now. That's his kind of brand. But before he was the addiction guy. And what he said about addiction was really interesting to me. He said, addiction is not your problem. It's the solution to your problem, right? So the problem...
That's really good, really good.
And it's a solution that is not a great solution, right? As he also fully acknowledged. But the problem is not that you compulsively overeat or take drugs or, sex, shop, work, whatever it is that you addictively do. The problem is that you have a feeling inside that makes you want to do that addiction to comfort yourself or to escape from the feeling or to make yourself feel better, however you want to put it. So people often do go, people do occasionally go from having a feeling of emptiness inside and swapping that feeling of emptiness from overeating to over-exercising, say, right? I've definitely met people who do that. It can work because once you get into it, once you get over the initial resistance, exercise will stimulate endorphins, which are your bliss, euphoria chemicals, as well as dopamine and lots of other feel-good chemicals. So it's a strategy that works, but those are the people who are much likely to overtrain to the point that they make themselves ill or, that they injure themselves. And so often, again, it's not sustainable long-term because the motivation behind it is to fill up the feeling of emptiness inside. And that feeling of emptiness probably comes from perceived neglect. I won't accuse anyone of anything, but you probably felt neglected or like you didn't get enough as a child. This is where people, this is a very common psychological thing of feeling like I'm not enough, right? So people often try and fill that void with various things. But another thing that's really common, other than having that void or that emptiness inside you, is that you've been violated, right? You've been attacked, you've been abused, and so then there's this idea that like making yourself big is like a buffer. It's like a defensive layer. In the case of maybe if you were violently assaulted, then being big kind of makes you feel stronger and less of a target. And if you were sexually assaulted, it's maybe it's you feel like you're making yourself less attractive, and therefore it's kind of keeping people away in that way. And so again, those are just examples. And, obviously I'm not a psychologist, because I'm not, any expert, but it's a thing where if any of these, if you can relate to them, again, could you get better without resolving these underlying issues? Maybe. Will you really get, stay better long-term? Will you, truly be healthy rather than just substituting maybe one addiction for another? That's a little bit more questionable, depending on how strong these psychological issues are. And then, again, this is why I said perceived, because it's all about how you feel. Like we have, one of our genetic insights reports is psychological trauma, and it's based on your response to it. So there are some people who go through horrific things that for whatever reason, and a lot of it is genetic, it's no big deal to them. Like it doesn't leave a deep scar in them that ruins the rest of their life to some degree. Whereas there's some people who go through things that, other people might judge as minor, that it's really devastated them. And like in some way they never got over it. And so again, that's not a judgment, whatever. It's not, if you're someone who is more easily traumatized, that's not your fault. That's something that actually is probably built into your DNA, as I just said. So it's really not about, if you had a bad childhood or if you had bad parents or if you had like dramatic traumas that, you could tell people and they go, ooh. It's just about how you actually feel. That's the bottom line, right? Do you feel like you chronically need to defend yourself and push people away? Do you feel like you have an emptiness inside that nothing could ever fill up, but you're always trying, And if that's how you feel, then again, that can really get in the way of it working.
Beautiful. That's really good, going through and explaining those truths, and which is going to lead me exactly into my next question. Once we've been able to identify these truths or these understandings, how can we put them into practical use? What can we do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, let's start with the physical stuff, right? So I would definitely look at the genetic risk factors because it's easy, right? I mean, I know I sell them, but you don't have to there's plenty of other people who do them, these days, although I would argue that our interpretation is, the most accurate, the most reliable and the most helpful and all the rest of it. But anyway, look at the genetic factors. So we have a report on the risk of being overweight. So simple as that, right? And again, now with all these genetic things, they don't necessarily tell the future because remember, none of these genetic reports will change throughout your life. They'll be the same at the age of 8 to 80, right? So meaning you might have been in a situation where, you're overweight at 25 and, really thin at 35 and you still have the same report, right? So this is a tendency. It's not a guarantee. But
I think that's a really good distinction. So I'm really glad you're elaborating on that. It's a tendency. Yes, really great distinction.
Yeah, it's a tendency. if there's no significant factors altering it. Like for me, for instance, I've always been thin. As I said, I'm the least thin now I've ever been, but I've always been thin. And, so I was expecting in my genetic report that it would say underweight, right? But it actually says medium, not overweight, underweight. And I thought about it. It's like, yeah, my dad's really thin, but actually my mother was pretty overweight. So I guess for me to be somewhere in the middle makes sense. And so the reason I've been thin all my life is not because I'm genetically predisposed to really being underweight, but because I've had digestive problems all my life, which I am genetically predisposed to, right? Like top 2% for, for those digestive issues. So sometimes it's not always as simple as that report explaining everything, but if it is, obviously, then it's as simple as that. There's also a report on visceral fat. We talked about that. Hypothyroidism. So we touched on that already. Do I think you should start taking any thyroid medication or even supplements based on the genetic report? No. The point of it is just to say, if you have a genetic tendency to hypothyroidism, then it's more justifiable to then spend the money to get actual blood tests to find out. Because there's, if you were to do blood tests on everything that you might have a problem with, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, right? Most people can't afford it, or their insurance is not willing to pay for it or whatever, right? So with the genetic reports, they're pretty cheap and they help you hone in on, okay, which of these things are worth actually testing. So if you have, there was a person, for instance, who in my life, like a very, big part of my life, who had all the symptoms as far as I could see of hypothyroidism, but they were very resistant to doing any kind of testing of any kind, money issues. And so I understood that. And then we did their genetic profile, and it turned out they have this, top 2% tendency to hypothyroidism. And so that convinced them, okay, this is something worth testing for. They tested it, sure enough, they had it. Now they're on medication. Completely changed their life, right? So that's where I feel it can be helpful. It's not diagnostic, but it's indicative or suggestive, maybe that's the way of putting it. And so, yeah, hypothyroidism, I think we should do a whole episode on it because it's fascinating to me. It's a huge factor for all kinds of health issues, but it's something, again, it's something that's actually been ridiculed, I would say, in like this idea that, I'm overweight, it's because I'm glandular, and, comedians would be like, you just eat too much, whatever. And it's like, no, it actually is a factor. It may not be a factor for everyone. It may not be a factor for you, but it is significant if you're, and this is a thing, again, that we talked about in the last episode, the distinction between optimization and okay. So you may well be in the range of thyroid hormone that's okay, but you may be low end of okay, which we would call medically nothing, but optimization-wise, not optimal. And so if you got your thyroid hormone to a place where it is optimal, then your metabolism would speed up to some degree, and then you would find losing weight easier to some degree, right? So it's really important. Now, we actually also have a metabolic rate genetic report as well, right? Thyroid hormone, although it's the main factor, is not the only factor. So there are other things that you can do to make your mitochondria more able to create ATP. I wouldn't recommend any of these as weight loss supplements because, again, there's so many factors. But if you specifically feel like your metabolism's low and your body's not making enough ATP, then things like coenzyme Q10 and PQQ are really good, right? In the area of supplements. Coenzyme Q10 helps your mitochondria to create more energy, ATP, and PQQ does that, and it also helps your cells actually grow more mitochondria, so it creates more little energy factories within every cell, and there's very few things that can do that. So that's stuff, that's in the realm of supplements that you don't have to get a prescription for or anything, that can be good for increasing the metabolic rate a little bit. But again, I don't want to deceive you about this, right? This is going to make a marginal difference. It's not going to be anywhere near as much as taking a strong stimulant or resolving a thyroid issue. But it's something, and so those who are, again, trying to optimize, I'm a big fan of those supplements. I wish we sold them, but we don't. In fact, nothing I've recommended today do I actually sell. Other than the genetic report. So yeah, another thing is tolerance of each macro, right? So we talked about this before, macronutrients. It is absolutely the case, I have seen experientially and in reports, that for some people, despite what all the keto people say, if they eat fat, it makes them fat. It makes them put on fat, right? If they eat a significant amount of it anyway. It's not true that, coconut oil, no matter how much you eat of it, it's not going to make you gain weight. It's true for some people, but it's not true for everyone. For some people, it will absolutely make them gain weight. So it's true that some people can't tolerate carbohydrate very well, that it will tend to dysregulate the blood sugar or the insulin, and then that is a significant factor for weight gain. That's absolutely true. But the opposite can actually be true as well, that especially with saturated fat, that people can't handle it very well, and then it will potentially absolutely lead to weight gain. So, and then lastly, the one dietary factor that probably is true most of the time is that eating more protein will help you to lose weight, because it will reduce your appetite. Like, you'll tend to eat less calories in total if you're eating a lot of protein, because protein is very satisfying, because protein is like the main thing that your body actually needs, those 8 or so essential amino acids specifically. So if you give your body an abundance of that, it is true that you'll probably have less desire to eat as much calories. But of course, not everyone can handle a lot of protein. So again, knowing how your body deals with protein can be really helpful.
It's really, really good too, because there's always that thing people a lot of times don't, overeat a grilled chicken breast, but it's quite easy to overeat a bag of potatoes or potato chips or something like that. So yeah, with that protein, it can be quite satiating. And then I guess in regards to the macros with that, it's trying to find your balance, right? And seeing what works for you in that regard.
Yeah, but the right balance for you may not be very balanced, So if you are, for instance, with carbs, that hunter-gatherer type who can really barely tolerate a significant amount of carbs, who certainly can't handle simple sugars and even struggle with complex carbs, then your macros may look like 20 to 30% protein, 50% fat, and 20% or less carbs, right? That's not very balanced, and it's not what's recommended in the usual food tables, but it might be better for you. And conversely, we speculated about this in the digestion episode, that if you're someone who doesn't produce much bile, if you're someone who doesn't tolerate fat very well, then almost the opposite, right? Maybe 20 to 30% from fat and 40 to 50% from carbs may work better for you. So yeah, it really. And some people would say that's not extreme enough. It should be 0 carbs or 0 fat, and who knows, right? Maybe there are some people that even that is, correct for. So yeah, right balance for you, as you said, Krissy, I think is the distinction. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com, because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code Rejuvenate. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code Rejuvenate for 20% off today. No, that's really good. I'm sure there's some more in that space, because then I think that also leads me into my question about, which is a very big, it's out there a lot today, is, diabetes and your body's response to sugar, because it's very heavy sugar in the diets of a lot of people today. And, how does that interplay with everything? Yeah,
that's a good question. So it's a huge factor. So as we said, some people, you're the lucky type that is most able to tolerate, the most evolved type, whose genetics have evolved to be able to handle carbs, more carbs, even simple carbs to some degree. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. And even if you have that genetic tendency to be able to handle simple carbs better than most, of course, you can still push it too far, especially with, the way that modern diets are these days. So it's complicated, but basically, let's look at it on a simple level. So on a simple level, if your blood sugar is imbalanced, that's a problem. Specifically because when you have a lot of carbohydrate or simple carbohydrate, what they call a glycemic load, then especially if there's not protein with it. This is why, when I just said the macronutrient balance, that should be in every meal. Like, you may eat potato chips, but I would never eat only potato chips. This is why I hate snacking as well, because then where's the protein, right? Your body needs protein in order to produce the right balance of, digestive chemicals and certainly also blood sugar chemicals. So when you don't have that, when you only have carbs, or when you have carbs without protein, yes, your blood sugar will tend to go too high, especially if there's simple carbs, or especially if there's a lot of carbs. And then your body, as long as it's still capable, you're not diabetic, it overproduces insulin because it panics to lower it. Then the blood sugar goes too low, which is hypoglycemia. When the blood sugar is too low, you're hungry, and you're legitimately hungry. Like, you will want something, and you'll probably want simple carbs. You'll probably want like immediate energy. And again, this is not wrong of the body, because from an evolutionary point of view, if your blood sugar got low, it tended to be an indicator that, probably you were starving or like there was a problem. And so you would be desperate for food, and you're desperate for, simple calories, because sugar or carbohydrates are the most easily converted into energy, right? Fat is like in between, and protein is quite difficult. All of them can be converted into energy. Like, to convert protein into energy also requires cortisol, requires stress chemicals. So actually your body has to go to some degree stress state to turn protein into energy. The process of turning fat into energy, beta oxidation, doesn't work so well for some people. So sugar is not the best form of energy, but it is the simplest. And so when when your blood sugar is low, which usually happens because it was recently high, then you're going to want to eat more. So absolutely, one of the reasons why people overeat, again, not discipline, laziness, all the rest of it, is because their blood sugar is on a roller coaster. And one of the other things that puts your blood sugar on a roller coaster? Stimulants. So this is where, even though, things like caffeine are recommended and for weight loss, and yes, it's true, short term, over the course of a few weeks or months, you do a study of people lose weight because their metabolism is jacked up by the caffeine. But what else is jacked up by a stimulant, and this is true of smoking as well. If you smoke, or if you used to smoke, or energy drinks, any form of caffeine, even some other stimulants like theobromine, which you find in chocolate and tea and stuff, it will spike your blood sugar, and then your blood sugar will crash. And when your blood sugars crash, you basically only have three options. You can stretch yourself with another stimulant. You can stretch yourself with something else, exercise, worrying about the rent, panicking, whatever. Or you can eat more sugar. And obviously the most fun out of those is eating sugar. So you're on a roller coaster, basically. So I think we need to do a whole episode on blood sugar and how to deal with it. But my simple advice, which always works for people when they follow it, they often don't. But again and again over the years, so many clients, oh my God, that worked, Elwin. First thing in the morning, within an hour or two at the most of waking up, have a meal which includes all of the macros, especially protein. When you do that, the protein helps to stop too much insulin being released, and the fat and fiber slows down the rate at which the carbohydrate goes into the bloodstream. So it's more of a slow, even blood sugar release rather than a spike, which inevitably has a crash afterwards. So if you have a decent meal, all the macros, right balance for you, within an hour or at the most 2 hours of waking, then your blood sugar will stay stable. Often you can go for 6 to 8 hours before you get hungry at all. Maybe if you're very active, depends how much you ate, but roughly something like that. And then you can eat a normal 2-3 meals a day. Now, again, I know this flies in the face of a lot of advice. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to lose weight, so I want to not eat as long as possible, which is not sensible. Why? One reason is what I just said, because then your blood sugar will crash and you will binge later on in the day or eventually. Or you'll do other stuff like taking stimulants, which again is not sustainable. It raises your cortisol too much. That creates other problems. By the way, one of the other reasons why your metabolism slows down is because not enough thyroid gets into the blood. Gets into the cell from the blood. Like I said earlier, one of the two things that stops that is too much or too little cortisol. So if you keep jacking up the stress with loads of stimulants or just a very stressful lifestyle, cortisol goes too high. That reduces how much thyroid can get from the blood into the cell. Then the cell starts making less energy. So it's really counterproductive. And caffeine has another special trick that it does, which is it actually indirectly blocks ATP production by blocking adenosine. So that's fun as well. So there's loads of ways that all of these things can feel better temporarily, but long term really create lots of problems. But yeah, back to the blood sugar. Just that simple thing. If you follow that advice, then you will not tend to overeat, and you're especially much less likely to overeat carbs or sweet, sugary foods, or be tempted to have chocolate or all these kind of stimulant things later in the day. The other thing, of course, is if you don't eat for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours in the morning, as so many people do, you just have a coffee or maybe a muffin or whatever, something small. The other problem with that is that your body goes into a starvation mode. And I already explained earlier why that's an issue, right? The body's like, oh my God, there's not enough food around. We need to slow down metabolism because there's not enough calories available. So by giving yourself that meal that I described within an hour or two of waking up, you are, first of all, telling your body there's plenty of calories, don't slow them down the metabolism. And second of all, you're keeping your blood sugar stable, which is going to make you much less likely to overeat and binge on things later in the day. So that's my simple blood sugar tip. Next thing would be hormones. So testosterone is significant for men, especially when it comes to weight loss. When men have too little testosterone, that's often where they start to gain more fat specifically. So we talked about that in the hormone episodes, optimizing of that. I won't go over that again. Estrogen, similar story for women. With women, it's definitely more complicated. There's that estrogen, progesterone, testosterone balance. And there's many different types of estrogen and all the rest of it. But in a nutshell, estrogen is an anabolic compound. Unlike testosterone and oxytocin and growth hormone, which are also anabolic hormones, those three all have a tendency for muscle gain, but actual fat loss. Estrogen does not. Estrogen absolutely lends itself to fat gain because, as we said, again, that's women have more of that tendency. That's one of the reasons why, if you take a boy or a girl, they, pretty similar body composition, but then when they become men and women will have significantly higher body fat, and they should. That's the estrogen, right? So that's correct and right up until a point, but if the estrogen gets too high, that can be an issue. Now, is that also the case for men? Yes, it is to some degree, especially if they're getting a lot of estrogen in their diet, if they're getting a lot of estrogen, xenoestrogens from plastics and all the rest of it. But there's another hormone that's actually also implicated, especially for male weight gain, especially gynecomastia, which is when men start to develop breasts. And it's actually prolactin. We talked about that a bit in the hormone episode. So that's significant one as well. And so again, for weight loss, if that's important to you, if you can afford it, I would do blood tests on at least those three hormones, because if testosterone is low, if estrogen is high, if prolactin is high, I'm not saying it's the cause, but it's a contributing factor that's important enough that it is very possible that if you don't address it, it will stop you getting to the weight you want to be. So it's not the only thing, but it could be something that no matter what else you do, that won't fix it. And then, talking about metabolism again, increasing testosterone will also speed up metabolism. And I have not seen research that proves this, but I very much suspect that increasing prolactin will reduce metabolism, because prolactin is kind of like inhibitory chemical. It's diametrically opposed to dopamine, which is a stimulating chemical, and it's opposed to testosterone as well. So I suspect that prolactin will slow down metabolism, but I haven't had that proven. If you've seen research regarding it, please, underneath the comments in YouTube. I'd love to see it. And then oxytocin is also important. I've talked about this a lot in hormones, so I probably don't need to go into it. Oh, no, I will mention it. In the context of, it's really great, as well as being anabolic in the right way, of helping to put on muscle and lose fat. It's really great in the context of addressing addictive behavior. And that's actually one of the things that it's prescribed for off-label, meaning it's not the thing it's licensed for, but doctors are allowed to give you a licensed drug for a different purpose if they decide to. And that's called off-label.
Can you say why oxytocin has that? Yeah, perfect.
Absolutely. So oxytocin is kind of, for people who've heard of it at all, it's kind of known as the love hormone. And, the main thing that it's known for is that mothers, newborn babies and their mothers have like huge amounts of it in the system. And that's absolutely true. And so it's like bonding and trust and social sharing and all the rest of it. And so all of that is true. But from an experiential point of view, having tried pretty much every hormone and neurochemical and seeing what it does, and also looking at the literature, in terms of how it feels, so it makes people more generous. For instance, there's a study on that before, double blind, right? People who are on oxytocin are more likely to be more generous when asked to give a charitable donation to people who don't. So yes, it definitely makes you nicer. But I would say the reason it makes you feel nicer is not because it makes you feel so loving necessarily, although it can, but it's because it makes you feel full. It makes you feel fulfilled. It makes you feel content. It makes you feel satisfied. And if you think about it, that's probably the main thing between mother and baby anyway, right? Is that like the child feels, I'm safe and I have everything that I need, right? And then the mother feels the same way so that she can share that feeling with the child. Because the child's in such an intensely vulnerable position that they need to feel that way. And again, if you didn't get that when you were a child, for whatever reason, even if it totally wasn't your parents' fault, if it was circumstance or whatever, that's one of those psychological issues, right? But yeah, so at a biochemical level, it makes you feel content and fulfilled, like literally. You don't feel empty when you have high levels of oxytocin. And so because of that, you are less likely to, not guaranteed, but you are less likely to engage in addictive behavior. And so that's one of the things that they use it for off-label, is for addictive, compulsive behavior. I think we were talking about this when you were visiting us, Krissy. For me, it totally works. Like, I would never have oxytocin before I ate, because if I did, my appetite is just gone, for food. My wife joked, she said, it doesn't do that to me at all. So I guess it depends on the person. But yeah, like all other factors being equal, it's good. It helps. And she said that, I think what she means is it didn't reduce her appetite anywhere near as much as semaglutide, but there's research on it, right? These doctors aren't prescribing it off-label for no reason. But again, it definitely will not necessarily work for everyone. And then serotonin is big as well. So oxytocin is that kind of feeling of content, fulfilled, satisfied, safe. Serotonin is actually that feeling of relaxed confidence. So I always kind of think of it as like a James Bond chemical. We think of it as like the anti-depression thing because that's what it's sold as. But the research that really indicates what I would say, how I interpret serotonin is looking at serotonin, especially in animals like primates. And what they basically found is that the most alpha primate will have the most serotonin, the most, whatever the opposite of alpha is, omega. So the lowest member of the pack will have the least serotonin. And what they observed is that serotonin is the thing that makes you feel it's safe to eat. And so like in a pack, say, of wolves, the way it works is there's a pecking order, right? And that term comes from like the strong wolf gets their first dibs, and then the second in command gets the second, and then, right at the end. So basically, imagine there's a carcass in the middle and a ring of wolves all around it. What is the thing that tells each wolf what my turn is, right? Does that make sense? Like, what's the thing that tells the alpha I can go first because I'm that confident and I'm that secure? that's high serotonin. What's the thing that tells the one that goes last that they have to wait for everyone else and go last? That's the low serotonin. So there's a huge status component about it. And feeling safe to eat is a significant thing. Now, you might say, well, if serotonin makes me feel safe to eat, then I don't want it, right? Because you want to eat less. But it's not as simple as that. Because often when you don't feel safe to eat, that is when you have access to food anyway, because there aren't any bigger alphas, growling next to you, you'll stuff food in unconsciously, right? Because you don't feel safe to eat. And so you're eating in this kind of unconscious, compulsive way. And so you're actually more likely to overeat. So raising serotonin, again, makes you feel confident that there's plenty of food around, right? Whenever you need it, there'll be plenty, and you're alpha, and no one's going to take your food away from you, right? If you have low serotonin, you're, oh my God, there's not enough food. I better eat it when I can because someone's going to take it away any second. So then you're actually more likely to eat more and unconsciously. The other practical thing of serotonin is that, again, serotonin makes you feel good in this way of relaxed confidence. And so carbohydrate raises serotonin. And so one of the ways that we soothe ourselves if we feel, this emptiness other than oxytocin. Oh, oxytocin, by the way, is stimulated by fatty foods. So if you especially crave fatty foods, that's often serotonin. It's often that you need more oxytocin. If you crave salty foods, that's often that you are stressed, and the sodium is excreted at a much more high rate than cortisol is high. So that's where we crave salty food. And if you crave sugary foods or sweet foods or even, bread, rice, that kind of thing, then that's often a serotonin thing. You don't feel safe, you don't feel secure, you don't feel confident, and you want to kind of boost that by raising your serotonin. So you can raise your oxytocin in all kinds of other ways, right? You can, other than getting a prescription for it, obviously there's all kinds of behaviors that raise oxytocin. And serotonin you can raise again with different behaviors, but that's pretty easy. Taking tryptophan, 5-HTP, just gives your body the building block to make some more serotonin. So that's a good way of dealing it. And then lastly, in terms of the genetic reports, because we have everything I've talked about in this section, we have genetic reports for, right? We have genetic reports on, I mentioned it, hypoglycemia, fasting insulin, testosterone. Actually, I think we don't have prolactin, but everything else we do. Yes, hopefully we'll have it by the time you watch this. Psychological trauma. So there's a report on that, and then there's COMT. I won't talk about COMT again. I think I did it quite a lot on the stress and anxiety episode. But again, that's a significant factor. If you find it hard to burn off stress chemicals, you are much more likely to engage in behaviors I just said, raising oxytocin with fatty food, raising serotonin with sugary food, to try and calm yourself down. And that's why I also include stress and the low mood reports in the weight loss thing as well, because to me, it's not good enough to just tell you what you should do. You also need to understand why you don't do what you should do and what you can do about why you don't do what you should do. Like how to really address the underlying issues.
I think that's a really great point. Yes, how understanding the why of it as well too, because otherwise you can get in this cycle of guilt or shame, or which then lowers your confidence, and it has this catch-22 effect, which doesn't leave us in a good position to carry on or to even get started, because sometimes it just you're just so down, why bother? But within all of this, Elwin, this has been absolutely fantastic. I love that little deep dive into oxytocin, serotonin, and the cravings and the salt and everything else like that, because it helps identify those things. So, what else? I know you mentioned the genetic reports, and we can look at that. Is there anything else that we need to know beyond and within this field around, having that optimal weight?
Yeah, I would say this will be the part of the episode where I get to the practical stuff, right? Now, again, I would say don't just do some of the stuff I recommended. Find out what's important for you, right? I'm always looking, when I deal with clients, for that weakest link, right? That thing that is stopping everything from working. And so that's why I go into so much detail about all these potential causative factors. I want you to have that aha moment. That might be me. And then you go and test and you find out and you're like, that's what's been stopping me all along, right? That breakthrough or epiphany for you to have is more important than just giving you tips. But I'll give you some advice anyway. So yeah, I've got a list here. I think we've already gone through some of them. See if your thyroid and sex hormones can be optimized first, right? Unless you're already on top of that, of course. But if you have no idea what your thyroid levels are, what your sex hormone levels are, especially if you're older, Like if you're a 20-year-old, that may not be as important, but once you get 30, 40, 50 and beyond, it's very likely a significant factor. Exercise in a reasonable way. We talked about that already. I'm not the exercise guru, but what I will say is the exercise guru don't do what they do. There's this idea of modeling, right? That if I want to be like them, I'll just do what they do. But the thing is, they may be many, many, many steps ahead of you. You know, another example of this is like wealth creation, right? Oh, well, this is what a billionaire does. This is what I should be doing. No. They need to do that because they're already a billionaire. That's not what you need to do as someone who's not. You know what I mean? And so it's the same. Billionaire seems very far away, but being like a bikini model or being a bodybuilder type or whatever may be very, very far away from where you are as well, as much as a billionaire is from, So, learn from someone who really works with people, I would say, on a regular basis, who's not dogmatic. All the things I said, maybe in the last episode about finding the right practitioner, apply that to finding someone who can help you with fitness and who can meet you where you're really at and who understands where you're at. So starting foods with a macro balance of sushi, we addressed that. Make sure it's also nutrient dense. We've only really talked about macros, but I absolutely believe that one of the other reasons why people overeat is because they're missing a certain nutrient. And so the body tells you to basically, and we already mentioned this in context of protein, that one of the main things your body wants is protein, which is why that is so satisfying. But if there's any nutrient missing, your body will actually tell you to keep eating, as long as your digestion can handle it. So this is where it's very important to eat nutrient-dense foods. And yes, ideally, do a test for all your, main vitamins and minerals and amino acids, like we talked about, I think in the digestion episode, and make sure you have all of them. Because once you have an optimal amount, or at least close to it, of all the nutrients, that is one less reason why you might want to overeat. Make sure it's chemical free. I remember seeing one person who had this whole diet plan, which is like, don't count your calories, count your chemicals. That's actually pretty smart. I don't want to get into all the massive details of that, but basically, if there's an ingredient, first of all, I was jumping ahead there. First of all, look at the ingredient label of everything that you eat. Now, I know some people would say, Elwin, there shouldn't be an ingredient label. You should only eat like one ingredient, like carrots, beef, apple, or whatever, right? But yeah, I get that. But most people eat packaged foods, right? So I'm saying, if you ever eat anything that has more than one ingredient, look at the ingredients label. And if it has stuff you don't recognize, is it always bad? No. Like some E numbers, for instance, are just vitamins. I can't remember any, but there's a vitamin C, vitamin E, are just E numbers. So it's not all bad, but look it up. If you can't be bothered to look it up, you don't have time to look it up, don't eat it, right? Like never eat anything that you don't know what it is. Because yes, there are a bunch of those chemicals that absolutely screw with your metabolism, screw with your mitochondrial energy production, screw with your hormones. They could be estrogenic, like we talked about. They could be thyroid suppressing. There are actually a bunch of natural foods that are thyroid suppressing. Goitrogens, all the cruciferous vegetables. So this is like a real contention, but I would not class broccoli or cabbage as a superfood. It's mainly water and fiber. It does have a bunch of, plant chemicals in that are good for you, but it actually has some that are not always good. And, one example is these things that suppress thyroid function. Soy is a big one that suppresses thyroid function, which is in a lot of stuff. Almost everything has soy in it that's processed and cheap these days. And even if it's not cheap, often. Cassava is used a lot these days as a gluten-free, grain-free thing in health foods. If you eat a lot of cassava, it really suppresses thyroid function. I could go on, but look into it, the things that suppress thyroid function. So even natural stuff. So, count your chemicals, but actually even look at, again, do you have to avoid cassava if you don't have a thyroid issue? No, but it's something to be aware of if you do, right? And do that for every meal. I don't know, when you're into a restaurant or something, you kind of can't, but you kind of can these days because they're so worried about lawsuits with allergens and stuff like that. You have the absolute right to ask what the ingredients are in your meal. And you can say, because I have loads of allergies and intolerances, and they'll get it out. They don't want to be sued, or they don't want to kill you accidentally, So actually these days, even with restaurants, you can. Certainly in every other case, you absolutely can. For blood sugar, do some tests, We talked about the A1C test, I think, in the previous episode. That's a great indicator of how high your blood sugar has been on average in the last few months. At least that one. That's a great one. Make sure to eat an hour or two waking. I said that already. Don't let your blood sugar crash. This is the thing. If you don't follow that advice and you wait 5 or 6 hours before eating, your blood sugar's already crashed. Once that's happened, you're always on a roller coaster. Even if you eat the perfect meal by what I said after your blood sugar's already crashed, it'll still never be balanced. Basically, once your blood sugar's crashed, you basically got to go to bed and sleep and start again. That's the only way that I found. As someone who used to have blood sugar issues. Just practical thing, decide on the portion before you sit down to eat and stick to it. Right? This is something that I'm guilty of. I actually have like a massively, I have average weight according to my genetics, but I have a fast metabolism. Like my body likes to burn a lot of fuel. I have a lot of stomach acid. I have a lot of bile. So like my digestion is always primed for a lot of food. Luckily, because I have fast metabolism, I never actually put on weight. But so I get what it is to overeat, is what I'm saying. To go, oh, I'll just go back and get one more of whatever it is, right? But certainly if you want to lose weight, that's not going to work, right? Stick to what you decide up front. Eat more protein, we talked about that. If you crave sweet foods, 5-HTP or L-tryptophan. We actually sell 5-HTP, tryptophan. If you crave salty foods, test your cortisol. If you crave fatty foods, consider oxytocin. We talked about all that. And then look at emotions, right? We talked about this already in the stress episode, but, maybe you need therapy, maybe you need counseling. Maybe if you can't afford those things or have a lot of resistance to it, you can look into it yourself. Read books about this stuff, Read books about trauma. I mentioned Gabor Mate already. I really like the works of Alexander Lowen and people who talk about bioenergetics. I think that's like very helpful. There's the classic, your body keeps the score. Look up trauma stuff specifically, is what I would say. The trauma and the impact that it has on the body, the mind-body connection, stuff like that. But of course, can you therapize yourself by reading books? No. But you can get a greater understanding of yourself and what is going on inside you and what really motivates you. Although we all have blind spots and we all have denial and we all have repression. There was a joke on a TV show that I thought was particularly funny. It was Frasier. I think a lot of people have heard of it. I was rewatching some episodes recently. And, the idea is they're two kind of uptight psychiatrist brothers. And the brother is saying to the main character, Frasier, is saying, there's something that you're not seeing. And he goes, don't be ridiculous. I'm a Harvard-trained psychiatrist. If I was repressing something, I think I know about it. Now, the reason why that's so funny to me, and you obviously got it, Krissy, is not the Harvard-trained psychiatrist thing. You can forget all that. It's, if I was repressing something, I think I'd know about it. And I've heard that so often from so many people that you can almost understand if you're a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, you would have that arrogance. But I've heard this from people who've done almost no research into the area. Like, oh no, I'm not repressing. I would know if I was repressing something. No, you wouldn't. By definition, suppressing means you have a glimpse of a feeling and you go, no, right? So people often do that of anger. They start to feel angry and they're like, no, or whatever, right? Repressing means it never got to conscious awareness in the first place. You have no idea that thing exists, right? So you may feel empty and, like you're not enough and have no idea. You may feel, unsafe and defensive and, without having any idea, right? So this is really important to have that feedback from someone else. And friends and family are good if they are, insightful and unbiased and compassionate and all the rest of it. But not enough of us have those family members, especially the unbiased bit, right? So it's really good to have a third party who doesn't have that bias, who has no skin in the game, as it were, can just be honest with you. And usually, look, psychiatrists are usually not telling you this is what's going on with you. They're usually just listening, but they help you realize stuff about yourself. Addiction support can be really helpful, right? 12-step programs, all that stuff can be good. Trauma work, I mentioned bioenergetics. I mentioned a couple of others in the last episodes. Somatics is good. But then also the more standard, easily available stuff is good. EMDR is good. EFT is good. Stuff that is beyond just talking about it, but actually getting it out of the body, basically, can be really, really good. You almost then don't need to talk about your childhood or like realize all this stuff about yourself. You can just clear the trauma out of your body using these techniques. Some insight is involved, but often it can be more powerful to do the stuff that gets the trauma out of your body than to sit there talking about it for years. Although often both is ideal, because by understanding that you create that connection between the brain and the body. But yeah, the body-based stuff is really good. And then all the stuff you can do for yourself, meditation, exercise, breathing practices. I always used to recommend, for instance, and I still do, before you eat anything, take a few slow, deep breaths, right? Get yourself into more of a ventral vagal state, so you're more present and you're less likely to overeat unconsciously without even thinking about it. Usually it's not, people don't overeat because they're too calm, they overeat because they're too stressed and they're trying to calm themselves down, or they're trying to, and this, by the way, like women tend to often overeat to feel better, but men actually overeat just as often to calm themselves down if they have a positive emotion. They could be full of joy and then they're like gorging on stuff, because men, I know it's a generalization, but often can't handle any intense feeling. So, you know, we gotta suss it down. And again, I'm not, you know, I'm trying to be lighthearted about it, but there's often real trauma that relates to that. You know, often men are taught that they're not allowed to feel anything. So, you know, anyway, those are all the kind of practical things that I would get into.
Wonderful. And then can you just quickly touch on things like, because I mean, obviously we take in a lot. You were mentioning, you know, the, with the chemicals that are in the food and things like that, could there also be some things that we can do detoxification wise that can help open up certain pathways in case there's anything inhibiting us in that way, that to us gaining, or not gaining, but getting to our optimal weight?
Yes. Yeah, I would say I'd probably want to do this in a different episode because it's a huge topic. But just in a nutshell, one of the things that stops losing weight, and it is important enough that I need to address it here, and we'll address it more in a future episode, is that fat cells store toxicity preferentially. This is one of the reasons why actually someone who has a bit of extra fat is often considered, maybe 15% body fat, something like that, is often considered to look healthier than someone who's like really skinny, because there's a kind of awareness that if you're really skinny, you haven't got enough fat for you to store your toxicity in. So it's probably in your organs, it's in your brain, it's like in really bad places. So there are numerous evolutionary advantages to holding extra fat. You know, the more obvious one is you've got spare calories in case there's a period of starvation. But another one is you've actually got a safe, way safer than any other option, place for your body to store excess toxicity, which it hasn't been able to process. So when you start to burn that fat as fuel, which you'll have to do if you want to lose it, all that toxicity will have to go somewhere, and it goes into the detoxification system. And this is why sometimes when people eat healthier, eat less, diet, exercise, all the rest of it, they start to get skin breakouts, they start to get digestive issues, they start to get headaches, all of those kind of things. So that we'll have to do in a different episode. It's a huge topic. But yeah, so be aware that you may have to support your whole your whole detoxification system. And then I'd say, you know, be easy on yourself as you're building new neural pathways as well. Like, remember that everything that we talked about is not only motivated from all the reasons we talked about, maybe because you're low on this or you don't have enough of that, but it's also because it's a habit, right? And so to go against that habit is not particularly easy. So always give yourself a break. What I find trips people up so often, again, in practice, is this black and white thinking. Is this, I have to be good, I have to be good, I have to be good. And then if you see eating correctly as being good rather than just doing what you want, then you will always rebel. It's, it's going to be bad, I've got to be naughty, I deserve a treat. And then when people, now, even that's kind of okay if it's not that often, like it doesn't ruin everything. But the problem is that people feel like it ruins everything, right? So they've been eating like what they consider perfectly day in, day out, and then suddenly they have the cake, the pizza, or whatever, and they go, oh, screw it, I give up, right? Like it's ruined now. I'm never going to be able to fix it. So, that kind of black and white catastrophic thinking, again, is something that probably some kind of therapeutic person can help you like resolve and work through, because I realize it's a lot harder than me just telling you not to do that. But it's good to be aware of it, so I bring it up.
I think as well, you touched on a really good thing, is then also understanding why you do that. Is that relating back into, I'm not, filling myself up, or I feel a little empty inside? Because I know that the truth of the matter is, like, if you are really, really, really good for a long period of time, and then you go off and you can undo every ounce of goodness in the kitchen for a long period of time as well. But then it's looking at the why. And I think that really, which I love that you're bringing up and that you're really addressing in this, is getting down into the psychological aspects and taking a deeper look at what's going on, how you're feeling. And even, sometimes you might not even be aware of the pattern that you're doing or why you're doing it.
Yes.
And Elwin, I know that there's a lot of people out there. They want the quick fix. They want the magic pill. They want some sort of shortcut. Can you share any of those with us that you may have discovered? And do any of them work? Or any of them real?
Now, that is probably the most common question I get in the area of health. Yeah. So the answer is kind of yes. So I would say I've really shared some of the most powerful quick fix shortcuts, and specifically I've mentioned thyroid and I've mentioned sex hormones, right? If you're low on those, and again, thyroid is suboptimal way more often than most of us realize, and sex hormones, even I think most of us are kind of aware that as we get older, they are definitely suboptimal. So just fixing those can make a massive difference to what fat we have in our body. So they are so effective and so powerful that you could call them quick fixes, cheats, whatever. I mean, they still take a few months to take effect, but they really make a massive difference. There are other stuff though. So, and I'd like to address them. So first of all, of course, there is stimulants, right? There is caffeine. Now I've already addressed that, right? So, but that is a quick fix that will work often temporarily. If you take very large amounts compared to what you're used to of a stimulant, you will lose some weight, but it's not sustainable. It's not good for you. I've addressed that. There's also something called semaglutide. Now, in the previous episode, I was referring to it by its brand name. If I can remember its real name, Ozempic. And I think it's got several, but I think that's the main brand name. But yeah, semaglutide is something that will absolutely help you lose weight. So all ears, right? And it will do it quickly. And it's been shown to help you lose maybe 10 to 15% of your body weight. There is a catch. The first catch is it makes you feel like crap when you first start taking it. Someone very close to me used it, and literally when I say feels like crap, like nauseous, no energy, could be all kinds of other stuff. Like, it's quite bad. It works, but it works by massively reducing your appetite. So we talked in one of the previous episodes, I don't remember which one, about like how the person produces a lot of stomach acid, unless it's so much it's causing a problem that they'll tend to have more appetite, right? So this will significantly reduce that stomach acid production. It also will interact with the hunger satiation hormones to some degree. So the person who I know very closely who was on it, they said their appetite went down by like 75%. Like, I'm sure they're exaggerating, but still, it's a massive amount. So this seems like the dream, of course, because from a simplistic point of view, like with one of the first myths we debunked, if the only reason that you can't lose weight is because you eat too much, then it obviously is very tempting to have something that will significantly reduce your appetite. The problems with it, I think I've already made clear in this episode, right? By reducing your appetite, you reduce your calorie intake. Reducing your calorie intake, you'll slow down your metabolism. Temporarily, if you massively reduce your calorie intake, will you still lose weight? Yes. But long term, are you addressing the root issue? No. Now, if you stay on semaglutide year in, year out, then you might actually be able to maintain that weight loss. That's one of the things that's interesting about it over the course of at least several years. But you have then perhaps addressed the weight loss issue, but have you addressed all the other problems with having a slow metabolism? No, you've actually just made them worse, right? So I'm not a fan of it for that reason. As I said, it works, but it works in a way, and of course, and it also has potential side effects of like potentially pancreas inflammation and fairly serious things, which is why it has to be prescribed and monitored by a doctor. So not a huge fan of that. Growth hormone, I'm a little bit more of a fan of. Not actually taking growth hormone, because taking actual growth hormone, first of all, very expensive. Second of all, there's always the problem when you take a hormone. And when I say very expensive, like just watching a video the other day, like some guy who had a big brand who was pretending that it was all natural, and it turned out he was on over $10,000 worth of growth hormone per month. So if you can imagine, and, big muscular guy, obviously. But so when I say expensive, I mean seriously expensive. But also the problem with it is that, as we talked about in the hormone episode, when you take an actual hormone, you make less of it yourself. Now, as I said, in the case of thyroid and sex hormones, insulin, that may be justified. In the case of growth hormone, I would say it's usually not worth it because it's not, as essential to optimize it, and because there's better ways. So a better way to optimize growth hormone is, first of all, lifestyle stuff. So exercise, so long as it's not excessive, increases it. Sauna increases it. There's a bunch of stuff that will increase growth hormone naturally. But if all of that seems like too much work, there's growth hormone releasing hormone and growth hormone releasing peptide, which is ipamorelin and CJC125s without DAC. I won't have to explain all that, but people who know will know. That's probably the best, safest forms, I would say. That's something that will tell your body to create more of its own growth hormone, has been shown through research to be significantly safer, and is used a lot by especially celebrities and, models and all the rest. People who want to look their best are often on that. Those people are often also in growth hormone, but they're making the switch to these peptides because they're a hell of a lot safer. So if you must have an actual intervention rather than, doing the work of a lifestyle change, then that would probably be what I would do for growth hormone. Oxytocin we've talked about at length, but it absolutely is a shortcut, again, for the reasons that we talked about. And I would say especially good for women, because a lot of women don't like to do growth hormone because of, its tendency to, and again, let's say this is not quite true, especially with the peptide version, but it can, make you more muscular. It can, make your jaw more square. You can take it until I'm not taking it. It can, do various things that, are considered undesirable for women. One of the other ways of increasing muscle and reducing fat is to increase your androgenic hormones, like steroids, basically, testosterone. A little bit of testosterone for women is actually often good. Once they reach 40-ish, a little bit more can optimize them. But oxytocin is a much better way of increasing that muscle mass while reducing fat without any of the androgenic qualities that testosterone have, or that growth hormone kind of remind you of a little bit. So not as often used as growth hormone and testosterone, but potentially really good, again, if you're into cheating. And I'd say, that's basically it. Of the things that actually work, there's a bunch of herbs that make a little bit of difference, like CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. There's the things that boost the metabolism a little bit, we talked about before, like PQQ. There's MOTC, another peptide, and 5-amino, which is not a peptide, but is often sold by the same company that sell peptides, which all work to speed up. Humanin is another one. They all work to speed up the mitochondria significantly, but none of them have any studies showing that they make a significant difference to weight. They help more, with that subtle increase in mitochondrial activity. You need a fairly significant increase in mitochondrial activity and metabolism to lose a significant amount of weight, basically, or even a moderate amount of weight. So, those are basically things I know that work.
Beautiful. And also, I think too, the big part of this is it's not always a one size fits all in this category, especially around, whether it's your age, your sex, where you're at and your physicality, your diet, your digestion, your genetic predispositions or things like that. But before we close, Elwin, I want to say thank you so much for sharing everything that you have done here, because there's just as well so much more for us to continue to do our research in, continue to listen, feel into our body, find out what we're doing, and just become aware of things. Are there any other final thoughts before we close?
Yeah, as I said, I have not been through this personally, even though people close to me have. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? I'd love to hear what's worked for you. And again, even with that, if someone says in the comments, this is the thing that helped me lose 100 pounds, that's great for them. It may not be relevant for you, but it might, right? So let's find out. Please share all the stuff that's worked for you. Also share the stuff that hasn't worked for you. Are you someone who did what I said and it didn't work? I always want to know about the exceptions, right? Did you optimize your thyroid and it still didn't help or whatever? I would love to hear your feedback and for you to tell me what has and hasn't worked for you.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Elwin. And thank you everyone for joining us and for listening. And remember to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And we will see you again next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, I want to tell you about a way that you can support the podcast while also getting great deals on high quality supplements that Elwin and I personally use. And that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is that they have great quality products with minimal fillers at a very affordable price. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in my experience, they're very helpful and friendly. And the thing I love most of all is the amazing descriptions that Elwin has written about each product category on that topic. And each product has so much education on it that I've actually learned more from reading the descriptions than I have from a lot of articles. So to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, use promo code RejuvenateMe for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order using promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.